watched the entire thing. I watched so far, I'm like, was it really that long ago? The hair,
it was always like lots of show of anger, but like actual diplomacy underneath the surface with a lot of like or people who
oh my God. Who's running? Rodgers Rich.
Rodgers Ranch.
I'll die down. I hope it
This is like the highest concentration of Rodgers that the district of Tofino has.
Watch out. But I mean, it's just
What's interesting is they're all here for different reasons.
what's that?
Oh, no, that's way too much.
I don't know.
I can see over my name.
I feel like it's like a lot of Israeli Palestine. Everyone feels like they have a claim to it.
Sorry, it's calendar work on one of those gals.
Right? Was that? Yeah, I thought there was today. September 10th. I didn't read very close.
Well, Brett just before leaving said, are you going to be at the public hearing for tonight? I'm very confused.
No, September 10th.
And it doesn't take much.
Who's the acting mayor in September? Because they'll be running the public hearing. Britt is the acting mayor. This is cool.
This might be next.
September, you're going to be chairing the meeting. Oh, are you? Yes, I am. Do we need like a acting mayor? Just actually keep close to you. Oh, okay. Jensen, you already tell you that.
Just pick on you because you would have liked to have arrived there.
Perfect.
Yeah, we all voted before you.
Thanks, guys.
I was working. I was in Tyson Walls at 6
You know what I have that? Because selling the daycare, all daycare up at the top of one. Not too many for like today. It's somebody good.
It's okay.
I was thinking about two locations, like there hasn't been any, and that originally was. It's not very ideal.
We should, there was two juices.
Was that all of them?
It was, yeah, I had a couple of them down.
It's pretty expensive.
I have.
Which is wonderful. He's like 2 years now, but you have a couple of those.
Yeah, I just heard a phone, I said I could wear passing all this, and it was going to a secondary bathroom. I was just filling that one up. So maybe that's what's not gone through.
You guys have Amazon? You watch Amazon?
No. Is it
It's a new series called The Boys.
Oh, it's a good, I saw the preview for it.
I watched the first episode.
Did
you watch Cherry Girls?
Yeah,
Girls?
it's
I
great.
loved it. The new season just came out.
Yeah, I'm
excited to see it.
I said the accents are quick for this time.
Oh, wow.
Robin had a hard time understanding it.
Did you guys is the second season? Is there going to be there's going to be that's probably
Did you watch the first?
Dairy is English. D-E-R. She's my kid. His mom is a sex therapist. And he ends up like after. I feel like you it's seriously one of the funniest shows.
I did adopt it.
My
Then I make a movie, could be very good.
What? That's great.
Is it British?
Yeah, rather than script.
So much conversation, you know,
So polite.
Okay. What do you say about the
you had any time off denied drink.
If people are trained.
Unless it is a death. Yeah, this is our season, this is.
orienting myself.
For you as well as us.
Did we figure out what happened to
There would always be
Alice?
issues.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Her hair's almost just.
It's great.
No one ever figures out what happens to that.
Waiting for that one.
You guys.
There's coffee.
Yeah, Andrew Bailey was on holidays, but he was back on Sunday, according to his auto reply. Here he is, here he comes. You spoke too soon.
Oh no, I meant, where is he?
Exactly.
I like watching his face.
Hi Andrew, how was your holiday? Good.
I went to
I'm
fabulous.
glad you got
Dunkin'.
one. It's nice to know you get a holiday.
Fabulous Dunkin'.
Wow.
Okay.
Life on the edge.
Man, that's you.
We're gonna steal it.
It'll work with it. Yeah.
9:59. My battery's breaking.
Does the other declare
If needed.
of interest on to EUPs?
All right. Yeah. Barely. Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Tuesday, August the 13th regular council meeting. I will call our meeting to order at 10 a.m. and recognize that we are conducting our business today in Pitt territory. And ask first, please, for a motion to adopt the agenda. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. And we have some minutes from the meeting held July 9th. For adoption.
Second.
Thanks. Moved and seconded. Any errors or omissions in the minutes? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. And meeting minutes from the special council meeting that was held July 22nd. Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any errors or omissions in those minutes? All right. Seeing none. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. Okay. No public comment on agenda items. Mayor's report. I do have something to read that I've prepared for today. Today is our first regular council meeting without Dorothy Bart. And since her death, it's been tough for all of us, and I think that today, some time after her passing, it's appropriate to read some words. Although a celebration of Dorothy's life is going to take place later this fall, and there are many, many more things to be said, today is an appropriate day to share some words about Dorothy here in the Tofino Council Chamber, where she spent countless hours in council meetings, Tofino Housing Corporation meetings, all kinds of committee meetings, strategic planning sessions, workshops, and open houses. Dorothy was first elected to Tofino Council in November 1998, and she served 12 years and 8 months. Had she served the full length of this term, she would have become the longest continuously serving member of Tofino Council since the Municipalities Incorporation in 1932. And right from day one, she was a very strong voice on Tofino's council. Each time Dorothy stepped into this room, she brought a determination and strength of conviction to serve the community that is unmatched by almost anybody else. She was persuasive and tireless, and she did not always say the popular thing. And in fact, sometimes she said it twice. She joked about being a broken record as she began to speak on various issues at the council table, but it was a demonstration of her complete consistency and her dogged determination and the fact that she knew who she was to the core and what she stood for. One of Dorothy's closest friends remarked to me recently that she often felt that she was out there fighting battles that no one else supported. Sometimes she was, and mostly that was because we hadn't yet understood the problem. Maybe she was actually way ahead of us. Dorothy was also described by a business colleague very affectionately as the loyal opposition. And I think that's worthy of note, not because of any partisanship or vehemently locked positions at the council table, but because of the crucial role of debate and dissent in any high-functioning democracy. Democracy is always best served by a wide range of ideas, experiences, skills, opinions, and attitudes. And as humans, most of us tend to avoid confrontation since it can be stressful and anxiety-laden. Despite the temptation to sometimes simply get along and go along with the majority, that is not what any elected official should do, and Councillor Bart rarely, if ever, chose that route. She challenged assumptions. She challenged the status quo, and she did not accept stock excuses or simplistic answers. She challenged us all, staff and council, to be our most critical and thoughtful selves, all in the spirit of building better community. Dorothy had a unique way of simultaneously holding us to account and supporting and encouraging us. And the truth is that I often look forward to disagreeing with her because I knew her perspective would help my own thinking and it would help council make a better collective decision, even if it was not the decision that she hoped we would make. Dorothy ran for office because she cared enough to accept the responsibilities that go with it. She could have taken those countless hours spent in this room to work at her business, or to spend time with her granddaughters, or to volunteer for one of the many arts and culture organizations she loved. But she didn't. She chose to serve the community. Her attention and dedication to the role of municipal councillor is one we can all learn from, and it sets a very high bar for those of us at this table who continue on as elected officials, and for all those yet to come to lead Tofino as mayors or councillors. The shock of her death is diminishing, and we're adjusting to the hard fact that she is not simply away on holiday, painting, or reading in France or Mexico. She's not rushing in at the last minute. Her iPad isn't going to go bing, and her phone isn't going to ring. And as she would wish us all to do, we will keep going, working hard, and we will all hear her voice very clearly as we tackle the opportunities and challenges before us. Not one meeting will take place for the rest of the term where we don't think about her response to the issues related to homes and housing, to the vital character of downtown Tofino, to tourism sustainability, to arts, culture, and heritage, and to the health of our small business sector. But ultimately, the loss to our council and the District of Tofino pales in comparison to the loss to Dorothy's closest friends, her family, especially her daughter Natasha, her son-in-law John, and to Lucy and Zoe, the granddaughters who changed her life and whom she loved so deeply and profoundly. And on behalf of the District of Tofino, I extend the sincerest of condolences to them all. Thank you. Okay, thanks everybody. When we know more about when Dorothy's celebration of life is going to be held, we will certainly be telling everybody about that. So we're going to move on into the correspondence section of our agenda, and we have several items to go through. We'll just go through them one by one. And the first is a letter from a local resident, Wendy Amrhein, regarding beach fires on Mackenzie Beach. And did anybody have any questions or comments they wanted to make about the letter? No? Okay. Any feedback from you, Chief, on the letter?
Well, we've received fewer of these letters this year.
It's true, we have.
The feedback that I've been getting from RCMP and the bylaw staff is that this scenario has been improving. They've not reported much burning of driftwood during the hours that they are available for patrol, which is great. Getting much better responses from businesses being prepared and offering their guests supplies so that they can be in compliance with the beach fire regulations, and seem to be people for the most part participating and following the expectations. So unfortunately it still happens from time to time after hours and that sort of thing, but overall the general belief is that things are better.
Great, thank you. Any questions? No? Okay. The next is a letter from James Rodgers in the audience, one of the many Rodgers here today. Thank you. From Coastal Animal Care Rescue and Education Network regarding a request for a letter of support for BC Rural Dignity Grant application.
I would move that we write a letter of support.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? No? Happy to support this. All right, all in favor? Thank you. The motion is carried. And the next is a letter from the Tofino Community Food Initiative regarding a request for support for a Vancouver Foundation Systems Change Grant application.
I would move, we provide a letter of support for the grant application.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Seconded, great, thank you. Any questions, any comments? No? All right, all in favor? Thank you, motion carried. And next is correspondence from the Ministry of Children and Family Development regarding the Childcare BC New Spaces Fund program. And this is a change that the program already exists and previously would fund up to $1 million for a local government or a building on local government land. And this is now been changed to up to $3 million. So I requested that it be put up on the agenda so that we were all able to be aware of this, and also to know, so that I could note that the survey work, the action plan that is being developed by a team of consultants is well underway, and the survey is closed, and now they're synthesizing all of the results, and that should really inform planning that the District of Tofino, Island Health, and the school district could do together to advance this. And it's really nice to know that there's more money. So at this time there's no concrete decision or plan, or council hasn't tackled this wholly, but I wanted to make sure everyone knew. Any questions or comments? No? Okay, thank you. And a letter from Minister George Heyman regarding our liquid waste management plan. Any questions that came out of that? Any comments you wanted to make on that, Bob?
No, this is not unexpected. We put together a very good amendment, and the amendment was mostly about the cost changes that we've seen over the last couple of years since the liquid waste management plan draft was first approved.
Right. Okay.
Do we have a monitoring committee that we're asking for?
We don't have one.
We have not set up a monitoring committee. It is on our radar. Blake Medlar, who worked very closely on the liquid waste management plan with us, he has been involved in monitoring committees on the other side of the island, and so he's standing by to help us set that up when the time is right.
Okay. Great. And then we have a quarterly report from the sergeant, the RCMP sergeant, regarding their Q1 policing activities. Any questions that arose out of that? He is always willing and able to come to council meetings as well. So even though he's providing quarterly updates, at any time if you want him to be physically present to ask questions, and he's very happy to oblige us. Okay, then we have a series of letters for UBCM resolutions. The City of Port Moody regarding support for the property assessed clean energy enabling legislation for BC. I'm just going to kind of read them and then we'll keep going. Prince George regarding their resolutions. North Cowichan regarding their resolutions. The City of Victoria regarding more of their resolutions. We're going to have a really busy UBCM. And the City of Pitt Meadows regarding their resolutions. And any questions from those? No. All right. And then at UBCM, there's the small talk forum. And so if anybody had any ideas for particular topics they wanted to potentially discuss or present on at UBCM, then August 16th is the deadline. Not seeing any. Okay. And then last but not least, there's a letter inviting any elected official to attend the Livable Cities Forum down in Victoria on October 28th and 30th. And this is something that I would be very happy to attend. And was there any other interest or?
There was interest, but scheduling conflict.
Yeah, scheduling is a little hard.
I might say correspondence.
Okay.
I could be interested maybe.
How many can we send? Well, it's up to us, as many as you, well, actually, it's up to us who we send, but they ask no more than 2 attend.
If nobody else is interested in it.
Okay. So if that's the case, I would say, I would move then that up to 2 members of council be authorized to attend the Livable Cities Forum in Victoria on October 28th to 30th and be reimbursed in accordance with the council remuneration bylaw.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any question, comment? Right, all in favor? Thank you, motion carried. Okay, that is it for our correspondence. And we had an invited presentation from Sandy Leslie, but I do not see her. All right.
Oh, she confirmed the date.
Stuck in traffic.
Oh, potentially stuck in traffic. Right. There's some
Is there
traffic
any
today.
trouble?
Well, there's some trail work going on in the park, so. Okay, we'll
Just
just,
later in the agenda if she shows up.
yeah, sounds good. Thank you. All right, then we'll get into our reports. And first up, Nyla. Thank you, Nyla.
Morning, Mayor and Council. This is a report regarding the establishment of reserve fund bylaws. So there's 3 reserve funds that staff is recommending that we establish today. One of them is the Financial Stability Reserve Fund, the second is Transportation Infrastructure Reserve Fund, and then Parks and Recreation Infrastructure Reserve Fund. So there's no financial impact regarding the establishment of the bylaws. There have been funds allocated for these purposes to reserve funds, and so a couple of them are a matter of housekeeping. One of them expands the use of funds we already collect. So I'll just go through them briefly. The Financial Stability Reserve will be for unplanned and unexpected significant operating events and emergencies. So some examples of that will be for significant legal costs or claims, insurance or deductibles, the results or the effects of inclement weather, and environmental hazards. This reserve fund will be established for revenue stabilization. The appropriations are intended to stabilize the impact of unexpected revenue downturns. So money will be forwarded to the fund from surplus, voluntary contributions, or other funds that council wishes to allocate. So currently the balance of the reserve fund as of December 31st was $80,000. Staff received the direction from council to establish this reserve fund as a result of a report that was given from staff just over a year ago. Transportation Infrastructure Reserve Fund will be established for money received from payments in lieu of providing off-street parking and loading spaces. So when an owner or occupier of land or of any other building or structure are required to provide off-street parking, they can provide a payment in lieu of providing those spaces. When those funds are received, we can place it to the credit of 2 types of reserve funds for 2 purposes. One is providing new and existing off-street parking spaces. We already have a reserve fund established for that purpose. The second purpose is transportation infrastructure that supports walking, bicycling, public transit, or other alternate forms of transportation. If council wishes to move forward with adopting and establishing this reserve fund, staff will be bringing forward a policy to council with respect to when these types of funds are collected, how they'll be allocated between the 2 reserve funds. The Parks and Recreation Infrastructure Reserve Fund is to establish a fund for the collection of capital and infrastructure levy that relates to parks and recreation assets. So those funds have been collected, no funds have been expended to date, and we would require adoption of the bylaw in order for the funds to be expended. So the money can be allocated to this reserve fund from the capital and infrastructure levy, but you could also allocate funds due to surplus or any other voluntary contributions council wishes. So the balance of that reserve fund as of December 31st was $436,695.
Thank you very much. Anyone have any questions on this? No? Okay. Then we have some readings to do.
I'll move that the District of Tofino Financial Stability Reserve Fund Bylaw number 1266/2019 be introduced and read a first, second, and third time.
Thank you.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any final question? All in favor? Thank you. Motion carried.
And I'll move that the District of Tofino Transportation Infrastructure Reserve Fund Bylaw number 1267/2019 be introduced and read a first, second, and third time.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions? All in favor? Thank you. Motion carried.
And that the District of Tofino Parks and Recreation Infrastructure Reserve Fund Bylaw number 1268/2019 be introduced and read a first, second, and third time.
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any questions on this? Nope. Sight. Okay, all in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. All right, thank you very much. All right, we have a temporary use permit
I'm recusing myself for conflict of interest
due to...
due to personal relationship and business.
Thank you.
I'm
Councillor
also declaring conflict of interest on actually the next two items, both temporary use permits that council will be considering due to the proximity of the stores to my two businesses.
Thank you. We will call you both back in when we are done. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning, everybody. So I have a bunch of reports to present. We're going to get started with some temporary use permits. I think you guys are mostly familiar with these, as we've been talking about a lot over the last couple months, but we'll run through this first one here. It's a temporary use permit for the West Coast Cannabis store. This is at 1182 Pacific Rim Highway. Units F and G, they're above the district. You know, I can't remember. There's been a few different businesses in there over the years. So again, here's the location. The red outline shows the entire property there. That's 1182 Pacific Rim Highway. And the smaller red square within there is actually where the precise location of the store is proposed. It's on the second floor of that building. It's a two-floor building. So the proposal is for a three-year temporary use permit. It's for a cannabis retail facility, so it's an existing unit in the building. There's the provincial license application in process. A recommendation to endorse their provincial application is actually part of this report. And the original proposed hours of operation are from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., 7 days per week. Within this report, we're ensuring that those hours are limited to 9 p.m. so that those hours cannot be extended past 9 p.m. As the business develops, just in order to keep roughly in line with the residential neighborhood nearby as well as surrounding businesses. So, quick review of temporary use permits. They're basically just a tool that allows a short-term use that's not allowed under the particular zoning for that property. They're issued once for a maximum of 3 years, and then they can be renewed for an additional 3 years. And you know, something that's quite important to remember is that they're very much intended to be temporary in nature. These aren't long-term land use solutions. These are just something where people can often try a new business or see if something is appropriate for a particular area. So a quick review of some surrounding policies. The properties within the Mackenzie neighborhood. The Mackenzie neighborhood within the OCP is classified as a mixed density neighborhood with limited commercial development. The commercial development is described as being in areas of nodes. We haven't actually defined where these nodes are, but by default, that kind of complex, the gravel parking lot, beaches, Tofino that serve that complex has kind of become the node for the Mackenzie neighborhood. So it's actually within an already existing commercial area, and it may be an appropriate long-term use for the area, but we'll be discussing that probably in a few years at a rezoning stage, is what I'm guessing. So we'll look at some of the TUP policy. It's providing for short-term economic activities. We're requesting a 3-year period for this TUP. We're hoping that long-term policy for the area isn't changed. This actual use fits in with long-term policy for the area in general and may be supported over the long term as this TUP kind of moves into maybe more permanent land use. And we haven't actually held security for this one or the Daylight Cannabis Co. TUP. The reason being is that they're also governed under the business licensing regime. So as the TUP expires, typically we would take security in order to enforce the removal of the use if we need to. We can enforce removal of the use through the business licensing program. So security is not deemed necessary for these two temporary permits. We're also looking to balance public and private interests. Private interests, economic gain for business owners as well as property owners. And public interest is the development of various employment opportunities as well as hopefully some housing for employees. We're looking to maintain a reasonable level of compatibility with the surrounding area. So it's already in a commercial area. There's many other retail businesses in the area there. We have some conditions associated with the TUP as well as the provincial licensing program that address a lot of the nuisance and security issues. And the hours of operation are quite comparable to surrounding businesses. So a quick look at some nuisance mitigation stuff. Lighting has to comply with Tofino's dark sky policy. There's going to be no removal of vegetation associated with this TUP, so it's already an existing building, but in case they're going to clear something for parking or something like that, it's not permitted under this TUP. We're going to have minimal signage, and then basically no annoyances to surrounding residential or commercial properties. And also no use of cannabis or smoking within the vicinity of the store. So safety and security, I believe Nicholas is working with the property owners as they're pulling a building permit to do some renovations to the store. It needs to meet any applicable building code requirements. There's also a number of security measures associated with this particular store, including particular training, lots of video surveillance, ID checks, secure storage cases or storage areas, as well as locked display cases. The store layout is sort of designed so that when people come in, they're not immediately surrounded by the products, and it's kind of designed to dissuade people from trying to get into any issues associated with security for this particular facility. So social benefit was another thing associated with this TUP. So what we're requesting, it's a little bit difficult for staff to enforce through the TUP process all the things that were outlined in the report. So what we are requesting is an annual report kind of given by the applicants to staff that we can share with the mayor and council. And this is going to go to inform us later down the road in 3 years if we're going to be looking at renewing the TUP or looking at rezoning. We just want to make sure that the applicants are actually at least trying to do the things that they've said they're going to do. Public comments. So there's a bunch of sort of public consultation during the development of the TUP policy, as well as this has been in the Westerly twice. This is the second time. But the most recent one was in the Westerly News August 7th. We had an ad, and then there was mail-outs, handouts in accordance with the Local Government Act on August 3rd. So options, we can approve the permit, refuse the permit, approve the permit as amended if you feel as if there's changes, or otherwise the permit. Staff are recommending option 1. And if anybody has any questions or comments, happy to try and answer.
Thank you.
I just have one question, Peter, and it was just because I can't remember. With the TUP, it can be issued for a second term to be determined, but up to a second, third year, 3-year.
Yeah, that's correct. So this is kind of a funny point of contention from talking to our legal advice in that essentially the Local Government Act states that a temporary use permit can be renewed once for up to a 3-year period. So they're getting it once, and then if council so decides, at the end of 3 years, they can renew it for up to 3 years. However, there's nothing that says that at the end of that second 3-year period, if the temporary use permit expires, it can't be issued again. So it only talks about renewing it, it doesn't talk about issuing it again. So some legal advice says we shouldn't be issuing temporary use permits for the same thing more than twice, and other places do it. As staff, we would probably recommend not doing it more than twice, mostly just because they're not meant to be long-term land use things. So it kind of defeats the purpose if we're just renewing temporary use permits.
Any questions?
Just a comment, just so there's no confusion, in their actual proposal, they're proposing for peak hours of operation 10 till 10 p.m.
Maybe that was in some different part of there, because I pulled that from their original application.
No, non-peak is 10 till 8.
10 till 8, okay.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that when we tell them 9 p.m. they don't go back and say.
So mayor and council are aware their maximum operating hours would be 9 p.m.
Thank you. All right.
Okay.
I'll move that the temporary use permit attached as Appendix 1 to the staff report, temporary use permit West Coast Cannabis Store, 1182 Pacific Rim Highway, dated August 13th, 2019, be approved and issued for a period of 3 years.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any final questions or comments? Okay, all in favor? Thank you. None opposed. Motion carried.
And that the District of Tofino Council has considered the location application for the proposed cannabis retail store at 1182 Pacific Rim Highway and finds that there would be a positive social benefit to the community if the provincial license application is approved.
Keep going.
Oh, right, I gotta keep going. All right, I signed up for that. And that having gathered the views of residents through the temporary use permit process by mailing and hand delivering notices to surrounding neighbors within a 70-meter radius of the subject property, council recommends that the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch issue the license to West Coast Cannabis Store subject to the hours of operation ending by 9 p.m. due to the proximity of the location to residential areas.
Second. Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any comment on that or questions? Okay, all in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. Okay, and our next TUP.
So this is very similar to the one that we just did, so I'll probably move through it a little bit more quickly. But this is also a temporary use permit for Daylight Cannabis Co. They're at 1-671 Industrial Way. That's the first unit of the Strata building at 671 Industrial Way, next door to Long Beach Automotive Tofino Cannabis. Or sorry, I'm kidding everything. Tofino Culinary Guild. That whole area in there. So here we have it, coming up Industrial Way. As you're going up Industrial Way on the left-hand side, it's going to be the very first unit on the end of that building. So again, 3-year TUP is requested. It's an existing unit in the Strata building. They're currently working with our building inspector, Nick Henderson, to bring everything they need up to code according to his particular specifications. So provincial license application is in process. Again, this one we're going to be following a recommendation to allow the Liquor and Cannabis Bureau to issue their appropriate license. And again, we're going to be limiting the hours of operation here to 9 p.m. in accordance with the surrounding businesses as well. So a quick look at the store layout. This is provided by the applicants. You can see the lower part of the picture there is actually the entrance. Then there's some kind of the store layout is designed to not put people directly into the retail area. There's going to be sort of an ID check before, and then up on top there is going to be some offices. In the back is going to be a secure storage area, and there's going to be locked cabinets everywhere. So again, the authority of the TUP, we just went through this, so I'm gonna skip it, but it's again a short-term tool for allowing land uses. This particular area of the official community plan is in the light industrial designation. So it basically encourages industrial uses to be here and encourages alternative forms of employment. However, it does not encourage retail exclusively. A lot of the other wholesale or industrial businesses within this area have retail components, but none of them are exclusive retail stores. So this may not be an appropriate sort of long-term use for the area, but a TUP will make it possible. At the end of 3 years, I'm sure we'll be discussing this again, whether or not it's appropriate for this business to continue operating in this area, whether they need a TUP or whether we're looking at a rezoning. Currently, staff don't support the long-term use of exclusive retail in this particular area. So again, they're requesting a 3-year period. Again, the proposed use isn't really aligned with OCP policy for this area. So in order to actually allow this use long-term through rezoning, it's going to be a significant process. We're going to be amending the OCP as well as doing a zoning amendment. So there's, but this particular area may not be appropriate, but we'll be revisiting that in 2 years. So very similar to the last application, the property business owners are looking to get some economic gain, but there's going to be some employment opportunities as well as housing for their employees. So the area is an industrial area, but the particular use is fairly compatible with the surrounding zones. Many of them have retail components and act sort of as if a retail, or at least a portion of them act as if a retail store. Many of the nuisance and security issues are addressed through the TUP as well as the provincial licensing program, and the hours of operation are very comparable to a lot of the surrounding businesses. So nuisance mitigation, lighting has to be in line with Tofino's dark sky policy. Existing vegetation must be retained. There's going to be some additional landscaping that was proposed by the applicants sort of around the edge of the parking area to provide a little bit more privacy for the business and to provide a little bit of separation between neighboring businesses down the hill. No annoyances to neighboring areas, and no use of cannabis or smoking within the same type of store. So safety and security, very similar to the last one as well. Have to comply with all the BC Building Code regulations as well as security measures, including full video surveillance, ID checking, staff training, secured areas, those kinds of things. Social benefit, we're going to be going through the same process. We're looking for an annual report. Again, this isn't something super fancy, but it's just a reminder to Mayor and Council as well as staff as to what these businesses are doing in order to take steps towards actualizing the proposals that they've put forward to us. So public comments, same as the last one. We had an admin in the Westerly on August 7th, and then mail and handouts to neighboring properties on the 3rd. There actually, for both these applications, there was nothing coming back. I think a big part of that was because we had so much public consultation earlier on in this process. Options, same. Staff are recommending option 1 that the permit be approved. Any questions or comments?
Councillor Chalmers.
With regard to the rezoning, ideally at the end of the 3 years, would the rezoning process kind of, if they decide to go towards the rezoning, end with the end of the 3 years, or would it kind of start at the end of 3 years, and then like just how does that work?
So ideally, when we do these temporary use permits, like what staff prefer is that we get the temporary use permit application, and at approximately the same time we get a rezoning application. So the idea is the temporary use permit is a little bit easier to move through process, and they can get their business running a little bit more quickly. And rezoning often takes multiple years. So within that 3-year period, we'll be working through the rezoning process with them in order that their business can basically continue uninterrupted at the end of the TDP. Or if the rezoning isn't complete and council and staff feel like everything should move forward, we can issue another temporary use permit to give us a little bit more time to work through the rezoning process. That's kind of the idea. Ideally, it kind of works out like that, but we'll see.
Okay, thanks. Thanks. Any other questions? Okay, I will do this one.
Thanks. Move the recommendation that the temporary use permit attached as Appendix 1 to the staff report temporary use permit, Daylight Cannabis, 1-671 Industrial Way, dated August 13, 2019, be approved and issued for a period of 3 years.
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any final question or comment? All right, all in favor? Thank you. Motion carried.
And move the recommendation that the District of Tofino Council has considered the location and application for the proposed cannabis retail store at 1-671 Industrial Way and finds that there will be a positive social benefit to the community if the provincial license application is approved. And that having gathered the views of residents through the temporary use permit process by mailing and hand delivery notices to the surrounding neighbors within a 70-meter radius of the subject property, Council recommends that the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch issue the license to Daylight Cannabis subject to the hours of operation ending by 9 p.m. in keeping with the hours of operation of surrounding businesses.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any final comment or question there? No? Okay, all in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. That brings us to the end of a very long process. But the beginning of something new for people, so good work, everybody. Get the other counselors back in. Thanks. Need a glass of water, Peter?
I'm all right.
Not yet? Okay.
Ready to roll?
All right, ready to roll.
Okay, so continuing on, this application was for a development variance permit for the redevelopment at Duffin Cove. The agent for the applicant is Jeremiah Deutscher. He's the architect on the project, or one of the architects on the project, I should say. So we're looking at varying the District of Tofino zoning bylaw. The variance is essentially to reduce the minimum required rear yard in a C5 zone from 6 meters to 0 meters to accommodate a roof line adjustment on the existing building. So there's a little bit of confusion with this when I sent out the notifications to neighboring properties. I didn't do as good of a job as I could have been explaining exactly what was going on, so we got a lot of questions. Typically, we have a lot of people who did not want the variance approved. However, once I explained what was happening, they were often completely fine with it. So this variance actually applies only to an existing building on the property. The property is already sited at 0 meters from the property line. It's legally non-conforming. It's been there for quite a long time. But any renovations do require a development variance permit. So they want to essentially extend the roof line of this one building so that it covers an outside staircase. And so a pretty minor renovation, but for better or worse, any renovations do require a development variance permit in this particular instance. That's it. Under the Local Government Act, it basically constitutes a further infringement of the bylaw, so we do need to address it through a variance permit. So this is the location down at the end of Campbell Street there, where the Duffin Cove Resort has been for quite a long time. The actual property, or the actual building in question, this is a sort of a closer in look at the actual site plan. So within the red dashed line there is the existing sixplex unit, so that's the one that's been there for a long time. The roof line that's being extended is kind of on the southeast, the longest jog of the southeast edge of the roof there. So this next picture kind of shows exactly where it's going to be. Unfortunately, I don't have a more pulled back picture, but right underneath that proposed new roof coverage there is where an outdoor staircase is, and they basically just want to add a bit of roof on there to cover the stairs so people don't get rained on when they're coming to the second floor. So a quick look at some of the internal criteria we use to evaluate these variance permits. As far as the form and character of the street, area, or neighborhood, the structure is already in existence. The requested variance is quite minor in scope, and it won't affect the overall form and character of the neighborhood. There's really no changes to the lot in terms of ecological value or preserving natural functions of the lot. No changes to the overall design and siting, no changes to privacy necessarily. The structure is on the setback line, but it already exists. My understanding is that towards the end of this development, the applicant will actually be planting a whole bunch of trees along that property line to increase privacy between the neighboring property. There's also a laneway owned by the District of Tofino between the property to the south. And as far as enhancing views, there won't be any changes. And then kind of regarding flexibility in the design and impact to neighboring properties, we sort of solicited comments from nearby property owners, but once I had discussed with almost all of them, they realized that it wasn't actually going to change very much in terms of their properties. So the notification was actually done on August 2nd, 2019, same as the rest of these notifications. And there were several inquiries received by staff, but once the proposal was clarified, most of them, actually I would say all of them, did not have any issues. So I didn't forward any of their correspondence because it was just an email chain of them asking what was happening, me responding that there is to extend the roof, and they said, okay, that's fine. So any questions or comments? Again, the options for this are to approve the permit, deny the permit, amend the permit, or defer otherwise.
Thank you. Did anyone have any questions?
Just a quick one, Peter. We had corresponded a bit on one, and there was I had direct correspondence from some of the, and there was a question that regarding an 18-foot. I was very unclear, and Peter and I corresponded. And I didn't hear back if that.
Yeah. So actually, I spoke with the inquirer. Not by phone, by email, kind of yesterday afternoon. They wrote back this morning. They're not here right now, they're in Ontario. And so they wrote back kind of in what would be the middle of the night for us. And so I got it this morning and they said that they're fine with it. I think they were just a little bit confused because the overhang is only about 2 feet, but they didn't understand why we were not just changing it from 20 feet to 18 feet and changing it from 20 feet to 0 feet. But then when I explained that it's not just the overhang, it's actually the buildings there too. So it all became quite clear.
Good.
Anyone else? No. All right then. I will move the recommendation that council approve development variance permit number 12-19 to vary District of Tofino zoning bylaw number 770/1997 for amended lot 2, DD 2692241, lot 10, section 114, Quebec District Plan 1615 as follows. A vary part 28.6 of the District of Tofino zoning bylaw number 770/1997 to reduce the minimum required rear yard in a C5 zone from 6 meters 20 feet to 0 meters 0 feet as shown on Exhibit A to DVP 12-19. Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any final questions or comments about it? Okay, all in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. Okay.
I'm just going to go back to the presentation.
Okay.
For this one.
All right.
It's upstairs.
No problem. Why don't we just take a 2-minute recess? Is that okay? Yep. No problem. Everyone, anyone? Oh,
Sorry,
why
that was my fault.
consent? That's okay. No worries. That's okay.
So my goes on there? I don't know. I mean, I'll add it to ours.
Yeah, I was like typical mom, I only get the dribbles.
Yeah.
Good to know. I don't get the dribbles. Good. I'm just curious to see about the one of the trucking thing. The thought is really the brand here. Yeah. Actually, I don't want to see it. Yeah. Oh yeah, me too. Yeah, me too. I feel super unprepared for it. I don't know. I don't even know. Well, because I didn't write about dinner. So we know. And it's just, and then it will just be the 3 of us. Yeah.
We're good?
Very good.
We're good, all right. Thank you.
Sorry for the delay.
That's all right.
Jamie's been very patient with me this last week as I skidded reports across the finish line.
Okay.
So this is a permission to proceed report for a zoning amendment. This is at 1200 Pacific Highway, the search for. So quick little background, the application was received on September 11th of 2018. Due to staffing changes and a whole variety of other things, we're just starting to get it going now. So this is the permission to proceed report again. So we're just kind of gauging the interest of Mayor and Council on this particular application and whether or not we should move it forward to the bylaw stage or not. So the location is this large parcel kind of adjacent to Pacific Rim Highway and Sharp Road. Stretches all the way down towards the Sharp Road hatch right there, and also on three sides encompasses the THC property, which is actually owned by the district and is the proposed site for some future affordable housing. The portion of the lot that's actually being considered for this particular development is sort of the westernmost edge of it there. Mackenzie Creek runs approximately from the southern property line towards the district lot there, and this particular development is proposed to be everything west of Mackenzie Creek on the property, so it's roughly outlined by that dashed black line on this map. So the proposal is a zoning amendment that will allow residential development of currently 26 dwelling units. The development is to consist of 8 duplexes, 14 townhomes, and 4 pods of staff housing. Each one of these pods will have 6 beds. So initial discussions with the applicants have indicated that the townhomes and pods are kind of earmarked to be for staff housing, primarily for Wiccan Inn, but staff are also interested in if other staff would like to live there from various other businesses. I think we'll be all right with that. And the duplexes are to be sold at market value. Again, these are just kind of initial discussions with the applicant, so that may vary a little bit as we move forward. Here's a bit of a site plan for the proposal. Currently, you can kind of see it's, again, this is a zoomed in part of that map that we showed just earlier. Basically, it'll look like a small cul-de-sac accessed off of Sharp Road, with the staff accommodation proposed to be down in the southeast corner there, kind of further away from Sharp Road. The duplexes will be closer to Sharp Road, closer to the northern lot line. Mackenzie Creek actually will border the development that's on the eastern side of the development, and it will kind of provide a buffer between this development as well as the proposed affordable housing development there. So it is worth acknowledging that the THC has been moving forward with their plans to develop, again, a fairly dense affordable housing on that small square there. So between this proposal and that proposal, the residential density of this area will be increasing. So when we're looking at these rezoning applications, we like to look at as much relevant policy and plans as we have. Typically, we start with the vision to action plan, which is one of the highest level policy documents. A few key statements that we pulled out of that really regard compact, distinct neighborhoods, offer nodes of commercial and retail services. A diversity of housing forms is available, and there also is provisions for healthy and affordable housing for both residents and seasonal employees. Ideally, this development will address both residents as well as seasonal employees. And one other thing that I did want to mark here is just that proximity to Mackenzie Creek is quite important. Mackenzie Creek is one of the last moderately healthy salmon bearing creeks within the district of Tofino, and so it's quite an important area as it moves through a variety of fairly heavy, development heavy areas. And so we do really want to acknowledge that we're trying to develop this housing with respect of the environmental sensitivity of Mackenzie Creek area. So looking a little bit closer in at the official community plan, the property actually has 3 overlapping OCP designations. Those are the Mackenzie Neighborhood Designation, Chesterton Beach Neighborhood Designation, as well as the Sharp Road Educational Research Park Designation. So originally, we were anticipating that this was going to need an OCP amendment. We sought some legal advice, staff discussed quite at length, and we've decided that an OCP amendment is actually not necessary. The neighborhood designations are intended for residential development, as this is proposed to be, and are trying to maintain an overall density across the entire OCP region of 8 units per acre. So this particular density will be a little bit higher than 8 units per acre, but when considered in the context of the entire OCP area, it is still significantly lower than 8 units per acre. The Sharp Road designation, which kind of encroaches a little bit on the eastern border, is intended for mixed use throughout the OCP area. So mixed use is typically commercial as well as residential. There's some educational components as well. However, this is just one small sliver of the OCP area. Again, these policies are meant to apply over the entire OCP area. So we don't think that having primarily residential in this particular part of the OCP area precludes other commercial or educational development parts of that particular area. So a quick map of the overlapping OCP designations. The red outline is approximately where the development is proposed to be. The Mackenzie neighborhood takes the northwest corner. Towards the east and northeast is the Sharp Road Educational Research Park, and then south and southwest is Chesterfield Beach neighborhood. So you can just see there's basically just a sliver of the Sharp Road Educational Research Park that's also included. But again, after reviewing the policies outlined for all 3 of those designations within the OCP areas, staff don't feel that an OCP amendment is necessary to accommodate this zone. So currently, the property is zoned Forest Rural District A3, so that's a large lot residential zoning, which basically allows for one house as well as accessory buildings and a caretaker's cottage. This proposed development will require rezoning to a comprehensive development zone, or CE zone, which is a site-specific zone. So it's quite particular. It'll only be applied to this lot. This zone will be a one-off essentially, and it will be designed to accommodate the proposed development. So setbacks, height, all these kinds of things will be taken into consideration. This particular zoning amendment would allow the future subdivision of the lot. So I think it's going to be a bare land strata subdivision, and then following that would be the build out of the proposed development. So this is kind of the initial step in the entire timeline of the development. So there's a variety of land use considerations outlined in the report. I just wanted to touch on a few of them here. Traffic and access are going to be significant. That turning from Sharp Road onto Pacific Rim Highway is not very frequently used right now, but obviously between this as well as the proposed Tofino Housing Corporation development will be a significant addition of density to those areas. So we'll probably be looking at traffic impact assessments and any frontage improvements recommended or required by the district engineer. Tofino Housing Corporation development, I've already mentioned it, but I did just want to flag that to make sure that council is aware that, you know, between these 2 developments, the character of that area will significantly change. Even though within the OCP it is kind of earmarked for residential developments, it is certainly a consideration. Servicing initial brief discussions with Ricardo indicate that he has no real issues with servicing residential developments. That's not been a major drain on our resources. He feels that this can be serviced adequately. Also, we do have 2 development permit areas that affect this property. The major one that I've mentioned already is the riparian area around Mackenzie Creek. So a development permit isn't triggered by rezoning, but we have asked the applicant to do some initial work. So we do have a initial report from Dave Clough where he basically outlines the streamside protection enhancement area, which is essentially a no developed zone. And I think he said at 12.92 meters, so about 13 meters off of the high bank mark of Mackenzie Creek. So that's an area that the development will not be permitted in under any circumstances. Outside of that, we still will have to take certain precautions regarding maintaining the integrity of the riparian area around that Mackenzie Creek. So the Mudflats Wildlife Management Area, they're outside of that development permit area, but I just did want to mention that as it is a fairly sensitive zone. The hatcheries down there, they regularly see bears and wolves and all those kinds of things traversing the mudflats. So it is has been indicated as a wildlife corridor as well as moving through Sharp Road area. So we'll have to be considering that as we move forward, or if we move forward with this proposed zoning amendments in terms of the form and character and design of the neighborhood. An amenity contribution discussion will probably occur. There'll also be DCCs and all these things applicable at the subdivision stage, as well as road frontage improvements. So those are future discussions. Regarding the rezoning, though, we will have a discussion about a community amenity contribution either before or after first reading. The other one that I did want to mention is this is something that we've all known about for a long time, but after last night we kind of have a more formal acknowledgement of it, and is that that whole area is within the tsunami inundation zone. There are recommendations typically in our reports that discuss not really further developing areas that are within a tsunami inundation zone. So this is nothing new, it's something that we know about, but just because we have recently received a lot of this information, I thought it's something that should be mentioned as well, and we'll be taking that into consideration should we move forward with this development. Form and character, also we don't have any development permit area on this area that addresses form and character, it only addresses environmental considerations. So any form and character concerns do have to be dealt with at the rezoning stage. So that will be something, it's maybe a little bit too early in the process to be getting that fine grained, but probably if we move forward with developing a bylaw for this particular development, we will be addressing form and character there as well. So just a quick look here at the red parent DPA. You can see it basically covers a big chunk of the proposed development area, as well as stretches into the Tofino Housing Corporation area. So between these two developments, we're anticipating that there will be approximately 13 meters of streamside protection enhancement area on either side of the stream, as well as other measures that have been taken to either enhance, protect, or enhance the functioning of Mackenzie Creek. Quick look at the red area there is just pulled from our GIS. That's essentially our current tsunami evacuation route. You'll notice just to the east of the lower black circle, which is where the proposed development is, there are a few high points there. So currently, Keith Orston has some initial discussions regarding potentially having those high points as tsunami evacuation areas for the areas around Chesapeake Beach and for that part of town. So right now, that's our tsunami evacuation route. That may change in the future, but that's at very, very, very preliminary discussions at this point. So a few options. We can proceed with the zoning amendment application. Staff can prepare a bylaw, bring it forward for first reading, and continue on that way. Reject or refuse the application, or including defer the application, deal with it some other way. The next steps, should we proceed, would be to create the actual bylaw, draft up the CB zone, bring it forward for first reading, go through a referral process, have an amendment discussion, second reading, and then have a public hearing prior to third reading and adoption if we get there. And does anybody have any questions or comments?
Okay.
It's probably the biggest one on the agenda.
Yeah, sure. Maybe we can hear from everyone on this one. Who would like to start? Any feedback or questions? Councillor Steer.
I'll take
You're at the end of the
first
line.
step. I'm at the end of the line here. There are several, I never know where to start with the pros or the cons, but the pros to this, of course, we recognize that the issues surrounding housing for seasonal workers and the industries that are involved in that, and this is an example of one of those industries taking charge of those issues and creating that space. So that is a positive, and I did like in terms of the green buffer and retention around highway corridor and the Sharp Road itself, providing a green space around there. That being said, just in the short time on council that I've been involved, the amount of residential, just residential, and I wrote the number of units that have come forward, is quite immense. So the general question for me often is the amount of growth that we're experiencing in Tofino in fairly rapid succession, in my opinion. And that's a different conversation than what we're having here, but it is something that is triggered by every time something like this comes across the table. Specific to this one, my concerns are, and they were written out in your land use considerations, and they almost went point by point from what I had written down. Obviously, the Mackenzie Creek riparian area is of concern, having been involved with that creek for a long time and know it intimately. The buffer recommendations from David, those are recommendations, and do we have the ability, if within the scope of the district, to have that reviewed and enhanced, possibly, if that would be the right word, or to have further explanation as to why a 13-meter buffer as opposed to a 20-meter buffer or a 5-meter buffer would be significant in that area. That's one question. Maybe start with that one, because I got one or two.
Sure, yeah,
one more.
I can speak to that a little bit. Typically, with things like development permits, particularly environmental ones, the entire system hinges on the opinions of professionals. And so because Dave is a registered professional biologist, he's bound by a code of ethics associated with a professional organization. When they provide those recommendations, that's typically a staff what we work as. I'm not a registered professional biologist, so I feel uncomfortable challenging him. But I do recognize that there may be some concern or considerations, or just a desire for a greater buffer. As far as getting a second opinion, I'm sure we could do that. I'm not sure if that's something the district would be willing to put out the expense for. But maybe, Bob, do you have any comments on that?
We actually have a third-party review line item for, we haven't used it for a biologist report. We use it primarily for community amenity policies and traffic studies, but it's not to say that it can't be used for riparian areas. I think one comment I would like to make is that we asked for the riparian report prior to any design, the site design, and so that the site design is related quite closely to the riparian area. So the riparian wasn't put in after the buildings were put in, it was put in prior to the buildings, and it was a very early conversation we had. So definitely through the zoning process, third-party review can be done, and we have funded for it as well. So that's a direction the council wishes to move. That would be happy to do that.
The other, thank you. The other concerns would be and just looking over that preliminary. One of the things that we was there's a significant change to that whole area. We're creating between our THC potential development there and this potential development. We're creating a new neighborhood in essence. And once again, just the change in character to that whole area is something that is of concern, just in terms of that growth. One of the things that will definitely come up is, because once again, very familiar with that site, the amount of traffic that this is going to create in an area, as I'm sure you're aware, that turning coming from the town side coming on to Sharp Road. And I know we're going to do a traffic assessment, and I know all of that. But it's something that I see regularly from both sides. It will just, there's no question, the amount of increased traffic in there will be problematic. And I'm curious to see in the traffic assessment what comes up. It is something that definitely I'm flagging. The on-site parking itself, with that preliminary look there, the amount of stalls that I saw available. Once again, we're creating. We don't want to create spaces for cars. We want to create spaces for people, but we do need to recognize that cars are going to be available, and one of my concerns might be that that Sharp Road itself would become a de facto parking, because I just don't see the amount of parking space that would be available in there. That being said, I'm way more concerned about creating spaces for humans than for vehicles. The only other thing that I just wanted to flag is, that zoning change, and I know we'll get there, but it is a major deviation from the current zoning that's there, and I recognize through the OCP that we have the ability, you look at that as residential neighborhood, but it is a very major change to the, when I read through the A3 zoning, what was allowed within there as to what's being proposed. For me, obviously, when we're making major changes or deviations from the current zoning, it's something that we should really examine closely to see if it fits within, presented something that staff thinks may fit within that area. So anyways, it's more comments and just the one question, but and I would just reiterate that my main issue is not specific to this, but the overall pace of growth and the amount that is going on without or I haven't been involved in those conversations regarding what is the limits to our growth here, whether it be residential, commercial, and it is something that I know this council and members of this council have expressed clearly, and I would love to have that conversation come sooner than later, because the pace of these applications that are coming in my short time on council to me is phenomenal. And without that conversation with the community and with council, I just feel uncomfortable with approving or moving forward with so many of these applications. I think I've spoken enough, and thank you, Peter, for that presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson.
A lot was covered there. I'm happy to see some housing proposals come forward, and this has been in the works for a while. There's one's coming, so I'll be voting with the recommendation today to move forward. The thing I would like to flag and reiterate, I guess, is the traffic pattern around that road. It's currently, the way I see it used, is always safe for the walking path, the multi-use path, and bicycle traffic. And there's that one crazy little stop sign for bike traffic that nobody pays attention to, but some cars think that they're supposed to stop, and anyways, it adds to the problem. So I'm glad to see that at least in this, I imagine this is a preliminary plan, that some consideration has been given to improving the safety there. But I'll be looking closely at any traffic assessment that comes forward as well, to see if possibly the left turn lane is enough, or if another left turn lane in the center of the highway might be needed for the other direction of traffic. Yeah, I think a lot of work has been done on this to cover off a lot of the concerns, and we brought them forward earlier. The buffer zones, looking into trying to find a different access off the highway other than Sharp Road was looked into once, and that didn't seem to fly with the highways department, I guess. So that's where I'm at with it.
Thank you.
Third in line.
Third in line.
Yeah, I have similar concerns regarding additional congestion, especially regarding what we heard last night about tsunami evacuation. So I'm glad to see that there was attention already being paid to possible alternate routes or alternate evacuation locations. I can definitely sympathize with and understand where Councillor Steer is coming from as to the rapid amount of development applications that we are receiving. But I do think that perhaps that this is servicing a need that's here, and that we're catching up a little bit, and the pace of these applications, while fast and furious, I think that the character of this area will definitely change, but it is in response a little bit to how much this town is changing. And I think that we do need to look carefully, ethically, and thoughtfully at development applications like this, and act in accordance with those ethics and those kind of ideals that we have for Tofino. And I think that due regard has been paid with this application to what we're looking to do, and certainly enough to grant a permission to proceed for me. I think that this is thoughtful and the type of development application that we're looking for. So I'm happy to go along.
Thank you. Councillor Chalmers.
Yes, mostly I'm going to reiterate what was said. I am supportive of the permission to proceed, and all the concerns were sort of unmet in the process. Parking, I feel the same way. People will have cars and they will find places to park from, so you see it in Ocean Park, and it's a concern I kind of didn't mention but had about the one on Hellison, that if we only have one stall per place, you're going to put two people in a one bedroom, and it stands. So looking more into that. And then as far as Councillor Steer said about where are we, I think when you start looking at supply and demand, I mean, we need the supply, and the demand will eventually level itself out. And if we do saturate the market, then that is going to help affordability as well. So I think we've been lagging for decades, so getting ahead of it, it would actually be beneficial. So I'm supportive. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be happy to support this application. I'm really pleased to see a business is actually trying to create some staff accommodation rather than just buying up houses around town. I think we know traffic all along the highway is a problem and it's going to get worse. So I think this is the traffic problem is something that has to be sorted out, not just for this development, but anything along the highway. So I'll be supporting this.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll move the recommendation.
But I want to speak first. Likewise, I'll be supporting this. I'm really enthusiastic about this project and looking forward to more discussion around some of the points that have already been raised around, I really do appreciate last night's conversation about tsunami inundation zones and coastal flood risk, and that was very immediate and last night, so it is tempting to kind of go, whoa, maybe not. But I think that's a conversation we just have to have and accept that we have a very urgent need for housing in this community, and it is about timing and opportunity in my view. And so it is not always the perfect location or the perfect project, but we can't reconcile the urgency of the need for housing with a lot of obstacles when we are provided with an opportunity from a willing landowner. And so this is, to me, where the negotiation has to take place, and we've just got to talk about some of these things in more depth, which we will do through the rezoning process. And I think that's the way it's going to fall out here. With respect to the parking, I understand the concerns, and they drive me crazy, frankly, because I really want us to dig into this and to take some more firm steps forward about talking about how many cars do people need. And there is a reality around the fact that people who live here do have cars. But as seasonal staff housing or as staff housing, particularly for the businesses associated with this, the path at the end, the proximity of the business and the ability for employees to walk to work or to bike to work, I think is something that has to be considered, although you can't guarantee that those people are going to live there forever. And so again, a particular landowner is coming forward and proposing something, and we must think of this use and the density in perpetuity, not just for this landowner or that business. And so asking ourselves is, have we found the right balance between parking and the number of places for cars versus the number of places for people, as Councillor Stewart put it, which is well put. So now, please go ahead, unless somebody else has anything else you want to say.
I'll move the recommendation that staff proceed with further review of the zoning amendment application for 1200 Pacific Rim Highway.
Thank you. Moved and seconded.
I just wanted to comment that it may have sounded that I was supportive of the proposal. I was hoping that wasn't the indication, because I am quite supportive of this particular proposal. I was reaching outside of the context of this specific one, but I
as you should. I mean, in the sense of good debate and discussion. And actually, on the subject of the stream, I'll say too that it's just the way that it is that we've got two proposals we're going to be dealing with that do border probably our only really significant or potentially significant salmon stream in Tofino. And as always, as you add more development along a sensitive area like that, the scrutiny gets higher as more happens. And so whoever's last to the table gets the hardest look. We do in Tofino have more stringent land use regulations around salmon streams than we are required to by British Columbia legislation. So to me, that's a positive thing that in some circumstance, we wouldn't even need to have considered hiring somebody like, or the owner wouldn't have needed to consider hiring a QEP had we not had what we have in place in terms of our regulations. And it might be something that this council wants to think about more, or just learn a little bit more around how that planning takes place and how a QEP's work is undertaken. And just looking at the Ocean Park neighborhood too, and the incursion that residents naturally do make into natural spaces that surround their homes, I would say that with both of these developments, we really need to seriously consider how do you work with the owners or the residents of those housing units to make sure that they really, really do understand how sensitive that buffer is on the side of the streams, and that creating a bunch of little trails and having dogs run loose, for example, just is not in the best interest of the salmon stream as a whole. So that's something that can come later. Any other comments? Okay, then I'll call the question. All in favor? Permission to proceed? Thank you. That is everyone, and that motion is carried. Peter's still standing there because he's gonna be for a little while longer. Thanks. Oh, multimodal, maybe that's Aaron. Maybe Peter's just gonna stand there because he knows he has to stand there in a minute.
I don't have a report for this.
Okay. That's all right. We've had an excellent presentation already. So, all right. So at this point, it is for us to consider endorsing the Tofino Multimodal Transportation Plan.
I will move the recommendation that the Tofino Mobility Tofino Multimodal Transportation Plan attached as Appendix 1 to the August 13, 2019 staff report titled Multimodal Transportation Plan be considered and endorsed.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any questions?
I just have one question.
Yeah.
There's been a lot in the press lately about e-bikes and the congestion that's causing, and there was reference to electric vehicles, but not really e-bikes. I mean, do we envisage them on the MUP, or are they going to be on the highway?
There is an action tracking item that asks staff to look at a bylaw for the multi-use path from a number of years ago. And that was one of the concerns and the reasons that was raised at council at the time, when even before e-bikes, we started seeing motorized scooters, motorized bicycles. It's something we haven't turned our thoughts to yet, but definitely something that we may in the future. But we haven't.
Do we know what the park is going to do?
They are going to permit electric assist bikes, to the best of my knowledge. I don't think they're going to permit fully motorized scooters or anything like that, but I think that'll, because of the park trail coming up, that'll be a good conversation to have with them and see what their policy is going to be.
Yeah, it may come down to a speed limit issue and a weight issue as well. When we started digging through it earlier, it's about mass and velocity. And so with those units, the assist bikes, you can tune them to do 60 or 70K, and they weigh 120 pounds, and the people riding them are 200 pounds. And so there's a lot of mass maybe on an area that a pedestrian may be on, or someone with a dog, or someone with a stroller, or a jogger. And so I think it'll be probably an issue that faced by a lot of municipalities.
If I may add to that, this was a topic of the Resort Communities Collaborative. Most of the other resort communities are, of course, mountain communities, and this is starting to make its way into the mountain bike culture. So both the province as well as the Resort Municipality of Whistler have done pretty extensive work on this that we're keeping an eye on. They're both coming to the end of their consultation period, and there are a number of themes that are emerging that I think that we will probably steal from and bring forward. And I think what Aaron has said with respect to how it gets kind of ratcheted back so you don't end up with the big heavy bikes going really fast seems to be where others are going.
Okay, I just want to try and get ahead of
Yes.
the game.
Okay, any other questions? All right, I'll call the question on the motion. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. Now it's Peter's turn again. Oh no, it isn't Peter's turn again. Gosh, sorry Peter, I'm just making you stand up and stand down. Grant, anything to say in preface to your report?
No presentation.
Okay, thanks. So this is a conversation that council's been having for a while around the directory signage, and the report is before us. Were there any questions that came from the report? No. Okay.
I'll move the recommendation that the staff be authorized to proceed with the renewal of the district-owned directory sign program for signs located at the intersection of Olsen Road, at Campbell Street, 1st Street, at Campbell Street, 2nd Street, at Campbell Street, and 1st Street at Main Street by the end of October 2019, and that the district of Tofino directory signage policy dated February 8, 2011 be repealed.
Thank you. All right. Moved and seconded. Okay. Yes.
The current users of these signs, they will imagine they will have their signs returned to them.
Yes.
And they've been well notified and all that stuff.
We did send out letters in December 2018 indicating the plan. We received feedback just from 2 individuals wondering what the next step or sort of replacement idea for this might be, and one other individual asking if there would be compensation for the signage because they were costly to build and will no longer be utilized. But they will have the signs back. They can use them where it meets the signage policies on their own business properties and those sorts of things.
Thanks.
And the final thing, I hope we're recycling the nicely hand-carved logs that are...
Yes, so the discussion so far has been to potentially use them for other community information such as water restrictions, possibly putting more time into getting fire-wise signage in place and those sorts of things. So whether they remain in the same locations or whether they're relocated to other high-profile locations, but absolutely future use for those structures.
Great.
Okay. All right, then, all in favor? Thank you. None opposed? Motion carried. Okay, now, Peter.
Alright, so my final 2 reports. This one, the other one first. The final 2 reports that I have, at least for today, are both development permit applications. So they're both at Jensen's Bay Road. I believe Aaron discussed this at the last council meeting. Typically, development permits for the past decade or so have been issued by staff due to some inadequacies in that delegation bylaw. They're coming back to be issued by council now, so I have 2 of them to present today. This one, the first one, is for Mr. McGinnis at 998 Jensen Bay Road. So development permits, basically, the local government has the authority to establish them and issue them through Section 488 of the Local Government Act. Basically, we have ours within our official community plan. So if an area on the map that is designated as a development permit area, an owner must get a development permit for that particular DPA prior to subdivision, construction, alteration of a building, or alteration of the land in any way. These are always issued by council resolution. Typically, they are delegated. As mentioned, they've recently come back to council for resolution. So the Tofino Mudflats Wildlife Management Area Development Permit Area is the development permit area that we're considering for this application. It extends 30 meters from the natural boundary of the sea along the Tofino Mudflats Wildlife Management Area. This is one section of it. It actually extends sort of further east. This is kind of the area opposite Chesterman Beach. So along the outer coast, we have the Foreshore 1 development permit area. This side, the Tofino Inlet side, has the Tofino Mudflats WMA DPA. And it's basically designed to maintain the ecological integrity of a very sensitive area used by, typically it's well known to be used by migratory shorebirds, but it's also used by all sorts of other wildlife. So this is the location. It's along Jensen's Bay Road there, 998. It's basically take a right after you come into Jensen's Bay on the highway and drive close to the end of the road there. It's on the water side of Jensen's Bay. So the proposal is to build a single-family dwelling and an associated caretaker's cottage on the property, partially going to be within the DPA. I think there's at least a 15-meter setback for this particular development from the high water mark, but the development permit area extends 30 meters from the high water mark. So the property is zoned RA1, so the proposal fits with the zoning, fits with the OCP, all these things. It's just the development permit that we're considering today. So the report was prepared by Dave Clough. It noted essentially that the long-term environmental impact of the proposed development is expected to be low. Again, there's going to be a solid buffer between the actual developments and the water, and there's going to be numerous other green portions of the property. So within the development permit area, we have particular guidelines. These are the ones that have to be addressed prior to issuing the development permit. All these things were essentially met by either the stuff that was provided by the applicant or the QEP report. The QEP report was a little bit sparse, so I actually spoke to Dave on the phone about it, and I got him to review a few things. He has not asked that any replanting be done. He does not feel that that's necessary in order to maintain the integrity of the area. He doesn't think that the development where it's situated is actually going to affect the mudflats in any significant way. He also mentioned that he does not think that a security is appropriate for this. However, it's typically the district policy to always take this security, even if it's small, for these types of developments should the proposed developments cause any inadvertent harm, and the district has to go and do what we can to prevent that harm. So we will be taking security, even though the QEP report mentions that he doesn't feel that it's necessary. The security is returned typically after 2 years with a follow-up report by QEP mentioning that there have been no damaging effects of the development. So this particular development permit would authorize certain alterations to the land. So this one includes clearing of the property as well as the associated construction of the house and the cabin. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Thank you. Councilor Anderson.
One of the things I noticed that was not covered in the report, and I don't think it's meant to be covered in the QEP report, and I don't think it's covered in our policies around the mudflat development permit zone either, and that's light pollution. So it covers up the natural features, but is there anywhere in this process that might look into what type of outdoor lighting a building might have, or anything like that? Or is that something that we would have to sort of go into our policies and change before that was covered off? Light pollution and the impact on that particular zone and wildlife.
Yeah, so with this particular development permit area, I don't think our dark sky policy is explicitly addressed. I think this one came into being the wildlife, the WMA DPA came into being at around the time of the 2013 OCP. So I'm not sure if we had the dark sky policy in place at that point, and so it's not included in the provisions of the DPA. Right now, the way development permits work is essentially if the applicant meets all the requirements, we're somewhat compelled to issue the development permit. However, Mr. Rodgers is currently working on a new official community plan, and we could be hoping to review all these development permit areas. And I think the plan would be to incorporate elements of our dark sky policy into these environmental DPAs, because that is a concern for not only staff but neighbors and other people advocates for the wildlife management area as well as other environmentally sensitive areas.
Okay, I'd look forward to seeing more work on that. It has been brought to my attention before. I forget exactly what the concern was and through which type of wildlife that was affected, but it's been raised with me before that along Jensen's Bay particularly, that lights can affect some wildlife there.
Thank you. Aaron?
So just one consideration there as we review the OCP is that if the WMA, if you just go back to the lot map, the WMA goes about 30 meters in from the water, and so the WMA itself doesn't affect the entirety of these properties. So when we do a development program, we're specifically considering that WMA area. And so if we were to want to consider something like lighting from the house rather than lighting along the foreshore, we'd have to maybe look at pulling that WMA zone back to property line along the road. So not saying that we can't, it's just a consideration of what we can and can't do in development permit areas, so limited by its boundaries. And generally these are developed through working with professionals about why something is as wide as it should be, or it could be wider. So just to clarify, so if somebody would come in and build a deck tomorrow outside of the WMA area, we don't have, other than a building permit if it's required, we don't have any oversight on that. So you can have a deck with floodlights, and it wouldn't trigger a DP in this area on that lot. Just to be quite clear about what a DP can do, and what it can do now, what it may be able to do in the future.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh.
Well, it wasn't a question. I was just, when I was reading David's report, and I'd never seen what a beggar tick was. I had to look that one up. And I was just, that particular property had been cleared before I know the property, and it was a lot of alder scrub that had existed if that's...
Yeah, so typically we would, prior to any alteration of the land, we would request a development permit. This particular individual cleared part of the land prior to that. And so what we have done historically as a district is rather than getting too crazy, we say, okay, that's done, but what we need is for you to still bring a QEP in, and we still need you to go through the process, and any remediation that they recommend, we need you to follow. Dave mentioned that he would have liked to have been there before the clearing happened, but he didn't think that any remediation was necessary in this particular instance.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. I'll just flag that I know Peter and Aaron are both aware that the Tofino Mudflats Wildlife Management Advisory Committee that provides advice to the Ministry of Environment on the WMA is perhaps reforming. It's been a bit not meeting, I suppose, for the last couple of years, and this is the kind of thing that has often been discussed at that table and could provide advice to the district in the future if we start talking about things like lighting and its effects of pollution and what on wildlife there, and kind of any other considerations that either we're not taking into account right now, or that just in the way things happen over time we forget about. And there's more and more development along the edge of the mudflats, and I think in some corners of the community just a little bit more concern about the long-term impacts of all of that development. So we probably can expect that to come up again. All right. Would somebody like to consider the motion?
Move it then, that council approve and issue development permit. I'm reading the right one here. Yep. Development permit number 619 to Bill and McGinnis for certain alterations on Strata Lot 23, District Lot 274, Clackwood District, Strata Plan VIS 4584 in the form attached as Appendix 1 to the report titled Development Permit McGinnis 998 Jensen's Bay Road, dated August 13th, 2019.
Thank you. All right, moved and seconded. Any final comment? Okay, all in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. All right, and the white property.
So this is, again, a very similar report for properties down the road. We're also looking at issuing a development permit for the WMA development permit area. This one happens to be at 926 Jensen Bay Road. So again, kind of run through this very quickly, but they're basically just authority given to local government to have some special considerations over particular areas of land that have often environmental or formal character, or there's a host of other kind of regulations as to how the development permit area should be considered. Again, we're looking at the Tofino Mudflats Wildlife Management Area, DPA. This particular location is just a little bit down the road. You take a left as you come into Jensen's Bay. And it's, again, on the water side, so facing the water, again, affected by this development permit area. So this one is for a very similar proposal. They're looking at constructing a single-family dwelling. There's going to be a suite. It's not actually going to be a separate cabin. It's going to be kind of a slight, I think they're actually connected by a roof line, but it's going to be a garage / cabin that's associated with the larger single-family dwelling. Property, again, is owned RA1. The proposal fits with the zoning, OCP, etc. It's just the development permit that we're considering in this application. The report was prepared by Dave Clough. Again, he noted that the long-term environmental impact of the proposed development is expected to be low. They had a bit of a further, I think there was about a 20-meter setback from the high water mark that they were not going to be intruding in, and then they'll be clearing. Usually, it's a lot of alders and kind of smaller trees in association with the preparing of the area for construction. So the guidelines, again, are laid out within this development permit area between the materials provided by the applicant and the QEP report. I think all these guidelines have been met. Again, I spoke with Dave over the phone just to clarify a few things. He doesn't feel that replanting is needed, and he also didn't feel that security was warranted. However, we will be asking for security, as again, that's typically the policy of the District of Tofino, just in case something bad happens. So this one, development permit 0519, would authorize alterations to the land as per the recommendations of the QEP related to the construction of a single-family dwelling and associated suite as per the submitted plan. Does anybody have any questions or comments on this one?
Doesn't look like it. Thanks. All right. I'll move that council approve the issue development permit number 5-19 to Sean White for certain alterations on Strata Lot 4, District Lot 274, Clapper District. Strata Plan Viz 4584 in the form attached as Appendix 1 to the report titled Development Permit White, 96 Jensen's Bay Road, dated August 13, 2019. Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any final question or comment? Okay, all in favor? Thank you. Motion is carried. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Somebody else's turn.
It is somebody else's turn.
Don't have someone do this for me?
Aaron, bringing us home.
Bring it home.
Good morning, Council, Mayor and Council. I think I'd just like to note that I wish Council Barrett was here to share the irony of where we are with development permits, in the sense that right now staff can issue development permits for former character buildings, and we can't for the environment. And Council Barrett and I had many discussions at Council and also out of Council about her desire to have the former character when it's come back to Council. So I just appreciate that. I think she would appreciate it. So, anyways. So we've recently been made aware of some issues in one of our bylaws, Bylaw 899, which is our land use and procedures bylaw, land use and fees bylaw. The language that we use to delegate authority to staff issue DPs is somewhat problematic, and we've been working with our lawyers to work this out over the last month and a half, and it's the reason that Peter was in front of us today. And so we reviewed it with our lawyers and had some options for council. Delegation, again, I think we're all familiar with this time, is an option under the Local Government Act. A council can delegate to staff, if so desired, the authority to issue development permits in terms of buildings, subdivisions, and alteration of land. We have a practice that we've been working with for about 8 years. We feel that it's established and efficient. It isn't perfect, and we've learned a lot over the last 6 weeks about our process and particular administrative process. And so we have some ideas of how to improve it internally if we move forward with delegation today. Currently, it involves the work of myself and Peter, qualified professionals, and in some instances committees, so district committees appointed by council, specifically designed to panel feed into this process. We only issue development permits in accordance with bylaws, and mainly the official community plan. This is where our development permits live. I think council is now familiar with our guidelines and checklists, so that as an application comes through, staff's job is to make sure that that checklist is filled and the bylaws are met. It also should be remembered that if this authority is delegated to staff, then an owner can request council reconsideration. In the 8 years that we've been doing it, so we've never been asked to reconsider these. I don't know if that's good or bad, it hasn't happened. So today we're just trying to determine whether council wishes to delegate the authority to staff to issue development permits, to what extent, if so decided, and then to sort of inform council that we'll be looking at having, as Peter mentioned, a further discussion about development permits through the OCP process. So today we have a number of options before us. We can look at no delegation, so council can take back all the authority for issuing development permits. We can do something where all development permits are delegated to staff, or another option is to delegate specific development permits to staff. That is the option that council is presenting to staff, that staff is responsible for the field mudflats area, riparian areas, the foreshore, tourism focus, and District Plot 114, which is the THC lot. There is also any number of combinations that could happen. There is an option to leave it as is. I wouldn't recommend that in the sense that right now we're in a two-step process where staff are issuing for buildings and council's issuing for the land, and it's a little bit awkward and somewhat complicated. And so if I had a non-recommendation, it would be the bottom one, but anything else from full delegation back to council or partial delegation to staff is supported. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, good things to talk about. I appreciate your comments about Councillor Burt too. I also see that already. I have that little voice in my head right now. I think I know what she'd be saying. Any questions or comments to lead us off on this discussion?
Yes. I feel like I'm taking Dorothy's role.
We did joke about rotating that.
Yes, we did
council,
joke.
yeah.
And since I'm sitting, I just, one of the questions in terms of that delegation, and I now understand that two-part process between buildings and land and how that can be a little problematic. To streamline, obviously, would make sense. I was just curious as to why the specific development permit areas that you had listed, why those were deemed to be more important, I guess.
Yeah, in the opinion of staff, those development permit areas that we've suggested that council delegate, or recommended council delegate back to us, are the ones that are more technical in nature. So these are the ones where we go out and make sure that qualified environmental professionals involved, or an outside body like the design review panel. And the reason the DRP is there is because the tourism-focused development permit area has two components to it. And so these are applications where we're confirming information with the qualified environmental professionals. We're under a checklist to make sure if we haven't received something, we're going to get it. And so we don't feel there's a lot of room to move. You know, we're not bringing a lot of ourselves into it. We're looking at policy in the OCP. We're looking at professional recommendations, and we're making sure that they match up. In terms of form and character, you could make the same argument, but from experience, it tends to be a much more political experience. What our community actually looks like in the buildings in downtown, or can cause angst within the community, and so. And so that was kind of the distinction that the staff looked at. The one that maybe the one that kind of maybe the outlier there is that the Tofino Housing Corporation development area. But again, that one deals with environmental energy efficiency and water conservation. And again, these are sort of, I would expect, non-political items and something that staff would be looking to rely on professionals' advice for.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions or thoughts, comments on this? I appreciate that we'll have a fuller conversation as we go through the OCP rewrite process, and I think some things that we just haven't probably thought of even today will kind of emerge through that conversation, and we'll have a second look at that. But I myself am really comfortable moving ahead with this. Okay.
Yeah, I'll just say I'm happy with the option 2 as the staff recommended, and it's worked pretty well so far. So.
Okay, so the way this is done is through an amending bylaw, so we have first, second, and third reading to consider. Just whoever makes the motion, I want to point out that the actual recommendation in the package is missing the .07 after 899, so if we can read it out as 899.07. Is that the deal? Guess I'll do it. Thanks, Councillor Chalmers.
Move the recommendation that the District of Tofino Land Use and Development Procedures and Fees Amendment Bylaw number 899.07, 2019 be read first, second, and third time.
Thank you. Second. Okay. Any final thoughts or questions? Okay. All in favor? Thank you. Motion is carried. Thanks, Erin. All right, that brings us to the end of our business in the open meeting today, and there is a question period, so if any of our lucky audience members have any questions, then please, we'd love to hear them.
Do I
Yeah, sure, just introduce
Okay,
yourself and then.
I'm Lindsay Whitefield, I'm a resident here. I have 3 little kids that have attended the daycare, and I'm here obviously acknowledging what you acknowledged, that you received a letter saying that there is a wonderful fund for a new space, and I wanted to know, like, what are the next steps in seeing that come forth. And you said it yourself, like, timing and opportunity is what we need, and you see it, there's so many children. We need spaces for under 36 months is desperately in need right now, and I just want to know what the process is and moving forward and accepting an application or even seeing this go forth. I'm very new to this whole process, that's why I've attended today. But if you would direct me in knowing what we can do to maybe, grab some funding and see this community grow into this beautiful place that we all consider home. Like, I don't want to, my kids love it here, and it would be nice for everybody to experience the daycare, go back to school. Like, modern day mamas are a real thing. Like, we can't do it at staying at home, so I want to hear from you.
Thank you. Thanks, Lindsay, and thanks for the conversations we've had before. And I just want to acknowledge that I have heard similar sentiments from so many different places in the community, including one of our own district of Tofino, who basically didn't come back to work after maternity leave because she couldn't find care for her child that fit with her schedule. So the next steps with respect to this is there have been some conversations between the District of Tofino, the school district, and Island Health around like kind of which partner could lead or move on something like this, and everybody has come back with the same answer, saying they need a little more information in terms of projections into the future. So for example, the school needs to understand its enrollment projections to understand whether it has space within the current school and the portables and the places that are set aside for future portables to expand and say add childcare in the preschool age range to that. But there's interest. Island Health, I think there's definitely some interest inside, but there's a bureaucracy to get through, and there's a bureaucracy with the District of Tofino too, in determining, does the district own land that it would want to expand or build a new facility on? So unfortunately, it's a sad answer in respect to it takes time to get that information and to build those plans, and the solution may not exist for you today, but I think that my personal opinion is that the District of Tofino is an appropriate body to look to for the long-term health of the community in terms of providing childcare, and that's a logical place for a conversation to take place. It'll solve the problem, we hope, for families that don't even exist yet here in Tofino, or for children that
and that's hard to understand, because as a current family, my child is going to kindergarten where there's 40 registered children. Like, I just don't know how much time there is to really wait on something that if the opportunity might be lost. It is hard to hear.
Yeah, I recognize that. And I think with any institution that's building new capital assets that has to maintain them in the long run needs to very carefully make the decisions to build those things and know that it can survive and that the money is there, not just to build it, but to operate it as well. So it's not to say that that conversation isn't very alive at the council table, because it is.
Always.
And we have, in our strategic planning sessions, which we haven't finalized yet, that's been a topic that's been discussed. It's been a topic that's been discussed at the staff level, and I think there's a lot more to come.
Okay.
I wish it could be faster. And I hope that you did participate in the survey that went out.
Oh, I did.
Yeah, good.
Comments and all, Josie.
I did hear there were over 300 responses to the survey, and fully a third of them came from Tofino, I think. So,
and we're just really trying to be a voice for the big community of families that currently don't exist yet, but still do. And if there's anything that we can do to contribute, and volunteer in hopes to get this going, like 100% behind that.
That's great.
Okay. I'm Cynthia Orr. I have 2 kids. I live in town. And we're just here. Lindsay and I are trying to show support. There is a big group of moms that are, have kids in school and are still having kids. And I feel like there's a big communication misconceptions, because we hear like, oh, there's $3 million now that you can apply for, and that's what we're hearing. And I feel like not that we're not getting support from you, but we don't feel like we're getting clear answers. Like if the ministry is sending you a mail saying like, hey, we have a grant for you, you should apply for it, it's gonna be really good, then what's our, I mean, I get it, as a town, we have to take considerations and everything, but I mean, I feel like our town is growing and this is an opportunity to partner with someone if they're willing to say, hey, we're gonna give you $3 million and your partner $3 million. Will it be the school, because we need better after school care. You know, if the daycare is not, if the town run daycare specifically is not making money or operating well or whatever it may be, then we should maybe look at saying what we can do to make it better, which I know we are. But also, you know, if we do take this opportunity to take the grant and build a new facility, then we could add other, you know, the daycare before the 36 months and after school care. So there's going to be other options to increase the revenue stream, I guess, if that's what we're trying to do. I kind of, you know, I don't know. There's $3 million that I feel like they're trying to force us to get. But, yeah.
Thanks, you bring up lots of good points.
I'm like, blah, blah.
Okay, sorry.
Here it is.
I'm
Bring
happy to
out
talk more about it. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you both.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for listening.
Mr. Bailey, any questions for us?
Yeah, I got three, but they're all like clarification stuff. 8.4, the cannabis one? Is daylight cannabis, you mentioned it, but I just want to make sure I get this right. It's going to be the only, if it goes through, is it the only place in Industrial Way that is specifically retail? Like, is that what was said? Like that was, this is the one place, there's not any? Or is it one of?
No,
Yes?
specifically retail.
That's the only one?
Specifically and only retail.
Temporarily.
Yeah, temporarily, right.
Now, and then 7.1 we haven't talked about, but campfire ban, is that, we considered it, but then we said, no, we're not going to do that, we're going to do this other program, and Fire Chief's saying that program's going well, that's what I heard. Is council considering having that discussion again? The letter seemed to suggest that he's in support of a campfire ban. Are we discussing that? Is council?
She.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Just want you to get it right when you're right.
What am I, I'll copy and paste.
No, after the last conversation that council had and gave direction to staff, and then staff came back to us with a report and we discussed it at length, there's been no further discussion at the council table about enacting a fire ban above and beyond what the Coastal Fire Center dictates.
Right on. Awesome, thank you so much. And then 8.11, was this spurred by the Surf Grove conversation? This the new contract, like is that connected to the conversation we had at the last meeting about Surf Grove Campground?
I think this is something that's been discussed amongst some councilors for some time, but then yes, the experience with the Surf Grove Campground definitely highlighted some deficiencies.
Good answers, thank you so much as well.
Thank you.
Good meeting, guys.
Thanks, Sandra.
Come to more of them, you'll see.
All right, so that being said, I will then move that the meeting be closed to the public pursuant to sections 91 ACE, K, and L of the Community Charter to discuss matters relating to personal information about an individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employer, agent, employee relations, the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements, discussions relating to the proposed provision of municipal services that are in their preliminary stages, and discussions with municipal officers and employees about municipal objectives, measures, and progress reports for the purpose of preparing an annual municipal report. Second. Thank you. All in favor? Can we take a 2-minute break? Thank you.